Well guys, as you know, the incompetent SNP are back to their old tricks yet again. In the last couple of days they've been called out for various things, and in this video we're going to focus on the COP26 delusions. Now these delusions that we've got here are no different to the usual ones that we see from those north of the border. You know, the screaming nationalists who are about as nationalist as Mickey Mouse. But essentially what's going on up there at the moment is they're running around screaming about how Margaret Thatcher has caused the streets in Glasgow to be dirty, rats to be running around and all of that. This is obviously despite the fact she hasn't been Prime Minister of the UK in more than 30 years. And at this point the SNP have been in power for what, 10 or 15 years now? Shit, it could be more and I can't even be bothered to look it up. It would seem though some delusional council member from the SNP up in Scotland has decided to blame her for the problems that are blighting that city, you know, with COP26 starting this week and them all banging on about their green credentials. Obviously this makes the SNP look like a bit of a tit. That, I expect, is why they've tried to pass it on to the Tories, but unfortunately this is the SNP's doing, plain and simple. There is no way you can swing this onto the UK government, and the article even says it's an embarrassment to us. No, it's bloody not. It's an embarrassment to the SNP, plain and simple. Maybe a small argument can be made that it's an embarrassment to the UK government, but it's not an embarrassment to the country as a whole. These people don't represent the whole country, they're just elected to lead it or cock it up. Now, the Telegraph is running this because of course they will be. They despise the SNP like most people do in this country. Shit, a lot of people in Scotland do as well. It headlines COP26, delusional SNP council leader blames Margaret Thatcher for Glasgow's rats and bin crisis, when obviously it's Nicola Sturgeon's doing, and let's be honest, it's her problem. She gets enough money from the UK to sort it out. It says the SNP leader of Glasgow Council has tried to blame Margaret Thatcher for the COP26 host city's rats and bin crisis. Susan Aitken was branded delusional after she suggested the former Prime Minister, who left office more than 3 decades ago and died in 2013, was responsible for challenges facing Scotland's largest city, days before the UN Climate Summit begins. This is of course because the SNP are completely batshit crazy and out of their mind. They seem to think nationalism involves leaving the UK Union to join the EU as its vassal state. Obviously, not much more needs to be said about the lunacy that they come out with on a daily basis. How many times as a channel have I called out the bullshit that they spout? It goes on, there are fears the event will be marred by industrial action, with ScotRail staff and Glasgow's refuse workers currently due to strike, potentially humiliating Britain on the world stage. No, potentially humiliating the SNP on the world stage, like I said. And as I said also, maybe the UK government to a small degree, but at the end of the day it's gonna be on the SNP, plain and simple. Obviously, it will be easy for Boris Johnson to just tell his little globalist friends that this is the SNP cocking up and make them look like a complete tit, which I'm sure he will do. It says, in an evidence session with the Scottish Affairs Committee on Monday, Mrs Aitken sought to downplay fears over the filthy state of Glasgow, claiming all cities have rats. Yes, all cities do have rats, though I don't often see them sitting on the bins as I walk down the street. How this person managed to get this photo unless it is staged is actually beyond me. It goes on, however, she was forced to admit one, possibly 2 recent occasions in which council workers had been hospitalised after small incidents where they had a very minor contact with a rat. Well, you can have minor contacts with rats. I've seen a couple of them over my lifetime in an alleyway, but it didn't require hospital treatment because I didn't fucking touch them. Clearly though, these council workers must have been clearing out some dirty shithole without the correct equipment to do it. This is of course why the SNP have likely tried to cover it up, which is something they often do. She then went on to claim many of the challenges faced by Glasgow were a legacy of our post-industrial past, when the Thatcher government walked away and abandoned and left in neglect communities right across the city. I'm sorry, but that is the biggest bunch of bullshit you could ever hear. At this point, you all know I'm absolutely not a fan of the Tory party, but trying to blame it on Thatcher or the Tories at all is just laughable. How long have they been in power up there and running the show, let's be honest? And as it goes, it's not exactly the first thing that they've completely cocked up, is it? What about poisoning children in hospitals or some shit? Wasn't it like that recently? The SNP are a complete clusterfuck, as you know. Oh, and there is also the drug death capital of Europe, ain't they, last I checked? Maybe they're not anymore, but they certainly was at one point. But this next little bit we've got is about the rail strikes, which to be honest I didn't actually think was going to be that interesting. It actually turns out that it is. It says Colin Edgar, Glasgow's council head of communications, told the committee that rail strikes would be a serious problem for people staying in Edinburgh if they can't get a bus or an Uber to the conference. Thousands of delegates have booked rooms in Edinburgh on the basis that it's just a 50-minute train journey from Glasgow. The plan B, if the rail strikes go ahead, would be to tell people not to go to stations and to travel by road instead. Oh, so at the climate conference where you're all talking about lowering emissions, you're going to start sending thousands of delegates by car. I'm sure that's lowering emissions, you absolute tossers. What a bunch of hypocritical wet wipes we've got here, openly going against what they're supposed to be doing just because they ain't going to be able to get there on the train. Usually I wouldn't be sitting there supporting strike, especially considering I don't know what it's over, but at the end of the day, pissing off these tosspots is something I'm always going to support. They've spent the last 18 months absolutely shitting on your freedoms, lives, mental health and everything else. It says, on a typical day, an Uber between Edinburgh and Glasgow would cost around £80 and take an hour and 10 minutes, meaning delegates from poorer nations would face daily commuting costs of £160. Which, yeah, they probably would, but our conservative government would likely pay for it all out of our pocket. You know, the taxpayer will be footing the bill for all of this. I highly doubt they're going to let these delegates or anyone else pay for it out of their own money. And if it's not the British taxpayer, then it'll be the taxpayer of the country that they're coming from. It goes on, however, there is expected to be severe road congestion, meaning the journey could take much longer, and huge demand would mean a surge in Uber prices. Oh yes, you bet your bollocks to a barn dance it will. And obviously, all those cars just sitting there with their engine running is polluting the place even more, so what was the point of your little climate summit, really? Now obviously after that the Tories have come out calling them a bunch of far-fetched losers and delusional, as you heard earlier. I'm not going to bother reading through that because I don't much care what the Tories have got to say. We can take the piss out of them ourselves, we don't need MPs to be doing it for us. But essentially this is just one complete clusterfuck that involves the SNP, and there is another. I'll cover that later on in fact.